The smell of melted butter mingled with the light aroma of vanilla as Martha tried for the third time to keep the bowl steady between her trembling arms. The kitchen was spacious and luxurious, but offered her no comfort. She knew exactly where each spoon was, even though her hands, now fragile and slow, no longer obeyed with precision. She tried to follow the recipe by heart, the same one she used to make when Gregory was little. She wanted to please him with that cake, perhaps remind him that she was still capable of doing something good. As she carefully stirred the batter, the spoon slipped and fell with a clatter to the floor. She paused, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, with a smile that tried to hide her fatigue, "Your favorite cake will still come out perfect, my boy. You'll see, Gregory will still smile at me." From upstairs, firm footsteps descended the stairs. Gregory entered the kitchen wearing an impeccable dark suit, already ready for work, his gaze cold as always. He observed his grandmother trying to clean the floor and, without approaching, just crossed his arms and sighed loudly. "This again? You need to accept that you can't do these things anymore, Martha. You'll end up breaking everything." She looked at him, trying not to be shaken, but her eyes betrayed her sadness. "It was just a spoon, dear. I just wanted to make your vanilla cake, like on your birthdays." Gregory turned away and went to the coffee maker. "You insist on this as if it would please me. You're just making my life difficult, that's all." That night, the dinner table was set with all the care she could still manage. Aligned napkins, crystal glasses shining under the chandelier light, and in the center a simple cake, somewhat crooked, but made with effort. Gregory sat down, and before she could place a piece on his plate, her hands trembled and the glass of juice toppled onto the white tablecloth. The liquid spread quickly, and the crack of the glass hitting the floor made Martha freeze. Gregory rose abruptly, unable to contain his anger. "This is why I avoid dinners here. Every time the same thing. You need to stop insisting on this. It's embarrassing." Martha tried to collect the shards even with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry, it was nervousness. I just wanted us to be together." He interrupted her, his gaze fixed on the scattered pieces. "Don't you realize that you suffocate me?" Later, alone in his office, Gregory stared fixedly at the unlit fireplace. The portrait of his deceased parents on the shelf seemed to judge him in silence. He massaged his temples, trying to dispel the pain that spread from his chest to his shoulders. "She reminds me of you all the time. I can't take it anymore," he muttered, staring into the void. He took a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. "I wasn't made to take care of anyone, least of all her. This was never my choice." The photo of his smiling mother with Martha in the background seemed to contradict everything he said. He squeezed his eyes shut, breathed deeply, and said in a low voice, "But I'm the only one left, aren't I?" Before we begin, comment where you're watching this story from, and subscribe to the channel to keep following. The next morning, Gregory walked hurriedly through the glass corridors of the company headquarters. He stopped in front of Jacob's office door and entered without knocking. His partner, with a firm gaze and discreet clothes, was finishing reviewing reports. Gregory threw himself into the armchair in front of the desk and let out an exaggerated sigh. "I can't live like this anymore. Every night is a mess. She needs care that I can't provide." Jacob closed the folder and stared at him unhurriedly. "You're talking about your grandmother. Martha has always been strong. She just needs affection, not a nursing home." Gregory shook his head, impatient. "She needs peace. And so do I. What I'm thinking might solve it for both of us." Jacob leaned back in his chair, suspicious. "What are you implying, Gregory? Don't tell me you're considering abandoning her." His tone was alert, as if already anticipating the answer. Gregory ran his hand through his dark hair, irritated. "It's not that. Putting her in a home would be cruel, I know, but what if she got married? To someone else? Someone who would take care of her? Then the responsibility wouldn't be mine anymore." Jacob frowned. "Are you serious? That sounds insensitive. She's your grandmother, for God's sake." Gregory laughed dryly, standing up. "Sensitivity doesn't pay bills, Jacob. I need a practical solution, and I already know exactly who can help me with this." As he left Jacob's office, Gregory walked decisively to the garage, where his driver was waiting. Inside the car, he typed something on his phone and, with his gaze fixed on the window, muttered almost to himself, "She'll have company and I'll have peace. Everyone wins." Across town, he had already sent for someone very specific, someone who would have no reason to refuse a tempting offer. As the car accelerated, Gregory closed his eyes for a moment. It will be better this way. I just need to organize everything before Jacob tries to interfere with me. That same afternoon, Martha was sitting on the back porch, a blanket over her shoulders and a notebook in her lap. She was drawing simple shapes of cakes and pastries as she used to do when she was young. An old dream, still alive in her head. I just wanted to open a small bakery, just to spend my days smiling again. But Gregory never has time to hear about it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. He has a good heart. It's just hidden under a lot of pain. She sighed, looking at the clear sky. Maybe one day, he'll see that I just want to be part of his life. Meanwhile, Gregory returned to the mansion with heavy steps and a serious expression. He found Martha still on the porch and approached without sitting down. "You're going to have a visitor tomorrow, someone who might like your cakes." She smiled, trying to disguise the tremor in her cup. "Really? That would make me so happy. I could make my apple pie some. Do you remember it?" He looked away. "I'm not interested in the pie. Just prepare yourself for a conversation. It will be important." Martha nodded, even without understanding. "All right, dear, I'll get ready. It will be good to have someone new around here." Upon going up to his room, Gregory entered the closet and took off his jacket forcefully, as if he were getting rid of a burden. He opened a secret drawer where he kept old contracts and removed an envelope. Inside was already the commitment contract he had discreetly ordered to be drafted. "As soon as the marriage happens, he gets the check, and I go on with my life." He put everything away and closed the drawer, then looked at himself in the mirror. It's just a plan, a simple plan, and she doesn't even need to know the details. He took a deep breath, adjusting his shirt cuffs. A new life for her, a free life for me. In the silence of Martha's room, she was still looking at the cake drawings. She ran her fingers over the scribbles as if they were real. She felt calmer, as if something was about to change. Maybe tomorrow will be a new beginning, maybe. Just maybe Gregory will see me with different eyes. The gentle wind swayed the curtains, and she slowly closed the notebook with a serene smile. Whoever this visitor is, I hope they like sweets, because I still have a lot of love to give. She turned off the light and remained silent, while Gregory, on the other side of the house, looked at the contract spreadsheet on his laptop without any remorse. Everything under control. No emotions, no complications. Tomorrow she will start a new life, and so will I. The sun had not yet reached the top of the buildings when Gregory crossed the company lobby with hurried steps and a cold look. In his hands, a sealed envelope and the contract he had drafted the night before. He entered his office, made a call, and ordered someone to locate a specific man. He gave no name, only the description and the place where he was always sitting, in the vicinity of the company, near the back alley. While waiting, he adjusted the terms in the document with surgical care, as if it were a common financial transaction. Everything needs to be in order. He comes in, signs, and disappears after the ceremony. "Quick, clean, effective," he muttered as he sealed the envelope. "She gets companionship, I gain freedom. A fair deal." About an hour later, the glass door of the office opened, and a man of simple appearance, worn clothes and mismatched shoes, entered with hesitant steps. Harry observed the space with attentive, suspicious eyes, like someone who is sure he doesn't belong in that place. The gleaming marble, leather armchairs, aligned paintings on the walls. Everything screamed luxury and detachment. Gregory didn't stand up, just gestured for the visitor to approach the desk. Harry sat down slowly, still silent, waiting for explanations. Gregory pulled out the contract and placed it on the table. "I want to make you a proposal. You don't need to do anything beyond attending a ceremony and taking care of a lady. In exchange, you'll receive good money." Harry frowned, leaning back in the chair. "Why would someone like you choose someone like me?" Gregory showed no emotional reaction, just adjusted the pen on the contract and indicated the blank space. "It's not for you. It's for her. My grandmother needs companionship, someone to take on this role and release me from this obligation. I don't want institutionalization. I just want someone to stay with her." Harry looked at the papers cautiously, read one or two clauses, but didn't seem convinced. "And what does she think about this?" Gregory shook his head dryly. "She doesn't need to know the details. She'll believe you appeared by chance, fell in love, and after the marriage you can do whatever you want as long as you keep her close." Harry let out a heavy sigh, crossing his arms. I've never been one to deceive anyone, but I'm tired of sleeping on the cold ground. If this is what will get me off the street, Gregory interrupted him coldly, then accept it, and don't mess it up. The two remained silent for a moment, until Harry took the pen with trembling, hesitant fingers and signed his name on the contract. Gregory pulled the papers back and stored them in the envelope. Then he extended his hand in a dry gesture. You will show up at the house tomorrow. I'll tell her you're an old family acquaintance. Be polite, avoid exaggerations. And remember, payment will only be made after the wedding. Harry shook his hand firmly, staring at Gregory with an expression that mixed uncertainty and dignity. I don't usually lie, but I understand the game. I just hope the lady isn't just another victim of convenience. Gregory stood up and was already walking to the door. Play your part right, and this won't be a problem. That night, Gregory arrived home and found Martha in the garden, delicately trimming flowers. She saw him from afar and smiled, despite the slowness in her movements. He approached without sitting down, still with his blazer on his shoulders. I have news for you. Tomorrow someone very special will come to visit you. Martha, surprised, wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him with curiosity. A visitor? Oh, Gregory, could it be someone from my old school? Or someone from the family? He laughed, a brief laugh without warmth. No, but it's someone who will change your routine. Think of it as a pleasant surprise. Martha looked at him with hope in her eyes. Is it about the pastry shop? Have you finally thought about helping me with my dream? Gregory turned his face and let out a dry laugh. With your condition? You can barely hold a spoon. A pastry shop doesn't go well with tremors, grandmother. Martha lowered her gaze, returning to tend to the flowers. He observed her for a few seconds, then entered the house, satisfied with having given a clear answer. The old idea of the pastry shop irritated him more than he would like to admit. In the office, he took the signed contract, folded it carefully, and stored it in the desk drawer. He sat down and opened his laptop to review his schedule. Everything goes as planned. The wedding will be discreet, symbolic, and with luck, she will be occupied enough to forget about me. Still with his eyes on the screen, he muttered to himself, I offered dignity, shelter, and companionship, better than any nursing home. In the company office the next morning, Jacob was entering with a stack of papers when he ran into Gregory, who was meticulously analyzing contracts. Sitting down without asking permission, Jacob placed the documents on the desk and stared at his partner with silent disapproval. Gregory raised his eyes, impatient. Any problem? Jacob pulled up a chair and responded directly. I heard comments about a strange movement yesterday. They said you had a man from the street brought into the building. Gregory leaned back in his chair, not denying it. And if I did? It was a personal matter. It's resolved. Jacob frowned, crossing his arms. You're plotting something, Gregory, and I fear you'll regret it. Gregory stood up and went to the window, observing the movement of cars below. Jacob, you always try to play the role of moral conscience. But the truth is that my grandmother is in decline, and nobody besides me cares. Jacob stood up too, his tone firmer. That doesn't justify deceiving her, nor paying a stranger to pretend to have a role in her life. Gregory turned with a cynical smile. It won't be pretending if she believes it, and in the end everyone wins. She gets affection. I get peace. Jacob approached slowly, placing his hands on the desk. You're about to cross a line of no return, and when you cross it, I want to see if you'll be able to sleep at night. The rest of the morning was filled with silence. Jacob left the office, visibly displeased. Gregory alone took the envelope with the signed contract and looked fixedly at the written name. Harry, a man invisible to the world, and now the pillar of my freedom. He rested his elbows on the desk and rubbed his eyes. The idea of a forged marriage still seemed absurd, but the contract was signed and the plan was advancing. I just need her to accept. I just need him to smile and pretend. After that, everyone goes their separate ways. The phone rang. It was the driver, confirming that Harry had already been instructed for the next day. Gregory responded coldly. Great. Keep everything as agreed. On the other side of the city, Harry was sitting on some steps, holding the folded contract in his worn pocket. He observed children running in the square and elderly people talking on a bench. He seemed disconnected from that world, as if carrying a secret that distanced him from everything. He touched his fingers over the paper and sighed. Is this what my life has become? A paper signed out of desperation. She got up slowly, walking along the sidewalk with thoughtful steps. Maybe I don't have a choice anymore, maybe. Maybe it's better than remaining invisible. At the end of the day, Gregory reviewed the sequence of events in the plan again. He ordered the house staff to line up, review the reception, organize a plausible excuse for Harry's arrival. Everything was timed. While speaking on the phone with the ceremony coordinator, he repeated the words with precision. The event will be discreet, no guests, just the ceremony and some records. Nothing more. Then he hung up and opened the drawer again, staring at the check that would be delivered after the wedding. Let this stay between us, Harry, and may my grandmother never find out. Night fell over the mansion, and in the upstairs bedroom, Martha was carefully folding her kitchen towels, already preparing for the next day. She didn't know yet, but her story was about to change forever, and even with her restless heart, she whispered softly before sleeping, I hope tomorrow's visitor brings light to this house. Gregory, on the other side of the mansion, observed his own image reflected in the mirror, with the tired expression of someone who plans not with love, but with coldness. Tomorrow marks the beginning of the end of this responsibility, and I will breathe freely again. 2 days passed in silence inside the mansion until Gregory decided to fulfill the next step of the plan. That morning, he entered Martha's room without even knocking, finding his grandmother sitting by the window, knitting with effort. She raised her eyes and smiled when she saw him. Before she could say anything, he spoke hurriedly. Today you're going to receive a visitor, an old acquaintance of mine. I thought it might do you good. Martha left the knitting on her lap, surprised. Really? What kind of acquaintance? Where do you know him from? Gregory looked away, going to the door. Someone who deserves a chance. Just be kind, as you've always been. And before she could ask more, he had already left, leaving her full of questions. Shortly after, Harry appeared in the mansion's garden, wearing clean clothes that Gregory had ordered delivered. His shoes were still simple, his hair barely combed, but there was dignity in his posture. Martha was sitting in her rocking chair, a closed book on the table beside her. Seeing the man approaching, she raised her eyebrows, confused, but smiled gently. Gregory watched them from afar, from the porch, and only nodded his head. Grandma, this is Harry. He'll be spending some time with you. I thought it would be good. Martha offered her trembling hand, which Harry held with respect. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope not to bother you. She laughed discreetly. Company is always welcome. It's been a long time since anyone visited me without ulterior motives. Gregory went back inside even before the conversation began. The first minutes between them were marked by silence and restrained gestures. Harry sat at the other end of the table, observing the garden while Martha resumed her knitting. Gradually, she began to make conversation, talking about flowers, spring, the smell of cake that had been baking weeks before. Harry responded with short phrases, trying not to seem out of place. However, there was a moment when she commented about her grandson. Gregory was a sweet boy. Now he seems so distant. He barely looks me in the eyes. Harry leaned slightly forward. Sometimes old pains make us build walls that are too high. Martha looked at him, surprised by his sensitivity. You speak like someone who knows loneliness well. In the days that followed, the conversations became more frequent and spontaneous. Harry began to appear every morning and stay until early afternoon. Martha started waiting for him on the porch, always with an extra chair beside hers. One day, while having tea, she began to tell him about her biggest dream. I wanted a pastry shop. It even had a name, Vanilla Enchantments. Gregory never found it amusing. He said it would be a disaster. Harry slowly stirred the sugar in his cup. Perhaps he never tasted your sweets with an open heart. She laughed sincerely. Perhaps he never had time to taste them. Harry, although hired, was beginning to approach with sincerity. He listened to everything attentively, asked questions, praised the lady's ideas, helped pick flowers, and even carried heavy objects for her. Gregory watched them from the office window but expressed nothing beyond impatience. The sooner this wedding happens, the sooner everything goes back to normal. One afternoon, Martha noticed something curious. While sewing a dish towel, her hands trembled less. She stopped, looked at Harry, and commented, "Can you believe I haven't dropped anything today? This hasn't happened in a long time." He He smiled with gentle eyes. Perhaps what your hands needed was sincere company. Gregory began monitoring the time Harry spent with his grandmother, and even without showing it, he was bothered by the naturalness with which the two interacted. One night, he commented coldly while closing the document folder. "He's too comfortable. Let him not forget what's at stake." However, Martha seemed more alive. The tremors visibly decreased when she talked or walked with Harry through the garden. She herself noticed it one afternoon while holding a cup firmly. "This is unbelievable. Not even the doctor could make this tea stay still in my hand like this." Harry looked at her seriously. Sometimes what the body needs is someone who sees the soul. The affection between them developed unhurriedly. Harry never overstepped boundaries, but the respect he showed gradually transformed into admiration. He listened to cake recipes as if they were stories of heroes, observed the wrinkles on her face with tenderness, and whenever she spoke of the past, he asked questions with genuine interest. During one of these conversations, Martha said something that deeply touched him. "I know Gregory brought you here with some purpose, but for the first time in a long time I feel important to someone." Harry didn't respond immediately. He just gently squeezed her hand. Later, alone, he muttered to himself, "He will never understand what he's missing." One day, while Martha was watering the hydrangeas, Gregory left the house and passed by them without stopping, only saying that the ceremony was scheduled for a week from then. She was confused, not understanding what he meant, and looked at Harry for an explanation. He didn't have the courage to reveal anything and just looked away. Martha, with the watering can in hand, asked softly, Ceremony, what is he talking about?" Harry tried to smile. "Perhaps some kind of tribute. Gregory has strange ways of surprising people." She nodded, but her expression became thoughtful. She had already learned not to fully trust her grandson's gestures. That same day, while returning home, Harry stopped at the entrance and observed the mansion for a long time before ringing the doorbell. He was thinking about how he had entered there with one objective, and now found himself involved with feelings he hadn't expected. When Martha opened the door with a smile and offered a piece of apple pie, he couldn't refuse. They sat in the living room and she commented with sparkling eyes, "You gave me back something I didn't even know I had lost." He swallowed the cake slowly and responded without hesitation, "And you showed me that I can still build something, even if it's from nothing." That night, Gregory was calling suppliers and organizing the legal details of the wedding, impatient with how long everything was taking. Looking at the photo of his grandmother with Harry in the garden, posted by a house employee, he shook his head, irritated. If he starts getting too emotional, I'll have to remind him of his role. But even with this silent threat, something inside him seemed restless. The serenity on his grandmother's face in the images didn't match what he always claimed to feel for her. However, he pushed the thought away. Feelings don't pay bills. This is business, nothing more. On the other side of the house, Martha was closing her recipe book with a discreet smile. For the first time in years, she felt she wasn't alone. And without knowing what lay ahead, she thought in a low voice, "Perhaps there's still time to dream." In the early hours of the morning, staff were rushing through the mansion, arranging flowers, adjusting fabrics, and carefully positioning chairs in the central garden. The decoration was elegant, discreet, with light tones and arrangements of white roses surrounding the improvised altar. A small group of journalists positioned themselves near the entrance, confused about the event, since Gregory, known for avoiding intimate exposures, rarely allowed the press to be present in personal matters. Jacob arrived shortly after, observing the preparations with a suspicious expression. Upon finding Gregory at the side of the house, he said in a firm tone, "Are you really going to turn this into a spectacle? I hope you know what you're getting into." Gregory adjusted his shirt cuffs and responded without emotion, "I'm just doing what's best for everyone, including her." Martha was prepared with care. She wore a soft blue dress, her hair styled with natural flowers, and an antique necklace that belonged to her mother. She seemed nervous but serene at the same time. Her hands still trembled, but less than before. Looking at herself in the mirror, she smiled emotionally. "I never imagined getting married again, and much less at this stage of life." A staff member was adjusting the hem of the dress when Harry appeared at the door. Seeing him, Martha paused for a moment. He wore a simple suit, but it was clean, neat, with a flower pinned to the lapel. "You look handsome, Harry, really. I don't even know what to say." He entered with slow steps, holding a small envelope in his inside pocket. "Today, everything will be told, Martha. Today, I will tell the truth." A few minutes later, everyone was gathered in the garden. The press kept their cameras positioned, whispering about the identity of the groom. Some wondered if Gregory was secretly getting married. Others bet it would be a masked corporate event. When Martha appeared, accompanied by Harry, the murmurs increased. Gregory, standing next to the officiant, observed everything expressionlessly. Jacob crossed his arms a few meters away, attentive to every gesture. Martha, with sparkling eyes, walked slowly to the altar. Harry offered his arm. She accepted with gratitude. "I never thought I would be here today, Harry, but somehow, it feels right." He looked at her firmly. "And that's why I need to be honest now." The ceremony began with traditional phrases, and the officiant tried to maintain a solemn tone. Gregory glanced at his watch discreetly, as if wanting to end it quickly. Jacob kept his eyes fixed on Martha's grandson, suspicious of the cold silence. When it came time for the vows, Harry stepped forward, took a deep breath and raised his hand. "Before saying anything, I need to tell everyone something." The officiant hesitated but gave him space. Martha looked at him confused. Gregory discreetly clenched his fists. Harry turned to the audience, facing the attentive eyes of the press. "The reason I'm here today began with an agreement, a contract, a payment." Silence fell over the garden like a dense fog. The photographers looked at each other, ready to capture every word. Harry continued without averting his gaze. "Gregory paid me to marry his grandmother. It was he who took me off the streets, who wrote the contract, who said it would be better this way. At first I accepted out of hunger, out of necessity, but then everything changed." He put his hand in the inner pocket of his jacket and took out the check. He extended it toward Gregory. "Here is what you promised me. I don't want it, because what I found with Martha is priceless." Gregory tried to advance, but Jacob held him back with a slight nod. "Not now." Martha brought her hand to her mouth in shock. Her expression oscillated between pain and relief. Harry looked at her, his eyes watery. "From the first day I knew you were different. Even trembling, even being treated as a nuisance, you had light in your eyes. And every time you told me about the bakery, about the cakes, about your life, I saw more than just a role in a contract." Gregory, red with anger, tried to justify himself. "It was for her own good. I wanted to give her company, wanted to give her comfort. No one else did that for her." Jacob looked at him with contempt. "No one else tried to get rid of her like discarding a weight. Is that what you call care?" The press, now closer, recorded everything. Harry turned to the altar, handed the check to the officiant, and looked at Martha with a firm voice. "I am here for you. Not for the money, not for the contract. I choose you, Martha, because you made me remember who I was." She had eyes full of tears, but she didn't break down. She walked up to him, ignoring the looks around, and held his hands firmly. "You are the first man who looked at me as a person, the first who listened to my story without rushing." They looked at each other in silence. Gregory moved away, humiliated in front of everyone. The officiant, not knowing how to proceed, just waited. Martha turned to the improvised audience and spoke with a trembling but determined voice. "For years, I was ignored in my own home. My grandson saw me as a burden. But this man saw me. He treated me with respect." Jacob stepped forward, approaching the altar. "Martha, if you want, this wedding can continue. And this time, without contracts, just truth." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Yes, I want to, because now I know what it's like to be truly loved." Harry just smiled. "Then let's continue, but this time, for the two of us." With the ceremony resumed, the mood changed. The initial tension gave way to a silent commotion. The press recorded every gesture with renewed attention. Gregory, now on the sidelines, watched everything without knowing what to do. Jacob approached him, whispering, "The truth always finds a way to come to light. And today, it found its way at the altar." Gregory turned his face, trying to maintain some dignity, but the damage was already done. His image would be headline news in the next day's papers, and for the first time, he felt that he no longer controlled anything. As the vows were exchanged, with simple and sincere words, Martha and Harry kept their hands intertwined. The wind swayed the veils, the flowers seemed more alive. In the end, the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. There were no fireworks, no rehearsed applause, just a respectful silence and a feeling of truth filling the air. Jacob approached the two and shook their hands, smiling with respect. "Congratulations. You did more than just a marriage. You taught what real love is." Martha squeezed Harry's hand tenderly. "I have never felt so respected, so alive." Gregory was the first to leave the venue. He walked through the gate without looking back. His steps were quick but heavy. Inside the car, he sank into the seat and closed his eyes. He knew the damage was irreversible. The contract, the attempt to manipulate the situation. Everything had been exposed before the cameras. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Martha and Harry received sincere hugs from the few guests present. There weren't many, but all were moved. Jacob, standing next to the central tree, observed the two with discreet satisfaction. He thought about how, sometimes, the most twisted plans could reveal more beautiful truths. He wanted to erase her story, but ended up being the spark to rekindle it. The morning after the wedding, news portals talked about nothing else. Headlines displayed the image of Harry with the check in his hand and Gregory with a defeated expression. Videos of the ceremony went viral in minutes, and morning shows discussed in acidic tones the scandal involving a millionaire heir who tried to use his own grandmother to escape a responsibility. Gregory woke up to incessant notifications on his phone, and upon opening the first company reports, he saw the immediate impact: plummeting stocks, messages from investors asking for clarification, and customers questioning the integrity of the leadership. He threw his phone on the table and muttered, irritated, "All because of that beggar. He ruined everything." Jacob arrived at the company around mid-morning, already aware of the repercussions, and found Gregory with a tense expression, sweeping reports off the table with his hand. "Satisfied, Jacob? Now we're a national joke. Want me to smile for the cameras too?" Jacob remained calm despite the explosive tone. "Don't blame me. You created this circus. You hired a man to deceive your own family and thought you'd come out as a hero." Gregory took 2 steps and approached his partner. "You could have prevented it, could have helped me contain this, but you preferred to applaud the scene." Jacob looked fixedly into his eyes. "I applauded the truth, and the public did the same. Now you need to deal with the consequences." Meanwhile, Martha and Harry were leaving the mansion for the first time since the ceremony. Instead of a luxurious trip, he took her to a modest chalet in a nearby mountain region where the cold required scarves and the silence was interrupted only by the sounds of trees in the wind. Martha, sitting in an armchair near the fireplace, looked around with enchantment. "This reminds me of my youth. My mother and I used to come to a place like this and make cakes with local fruits." Harry brought a basket with fresh bread and hot tea and sat down beside her. "You can still do all that. That pastry shop. It can still exist, Martha." She sighed and smiled. "Is it possible after everything? In the afternoon of the second day, the two sat at a small wooden table with papers scattered across it. Martha drew calmly, her strokes still a bit shaky, but much firmer than before. She was sketching the facade of a store with the name she had never forgotten, Vanilla Enchantments. Harry observed in silence, touched by her dedication. "You already have the name, you already have the recipes, and now you have someone who believes in you." She stopped drawing for a moment and looked into his eyes. "You are the first person who truly believed in me. Not even my grandson would look at these drawings." He smiled, lightly touching her hand. He lost the chance to see this happen. On the other side of the city, Gregory watched, perplexed, a news report showing Martha smiling in front of the chalet next to Harry. It was a brief interview where she talked about her desire to open a pastry shop and how she finally felt alive. He turned off the television forcefully, threw the remote on the sofa, and began to walk in circles. "She's playing with my surname. How dare she?" As if everything were a great achievement. He picked up the phone, called Jacob, and spoke without breathing. "Did you see the report? She's going to open a store as if she came out victorious." Jacob responded firmly. "And what's wrong with that? She deserves this. For the first time, she owns her own story." Gregory didn't respond immediately. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He felt something he couldn't name. Part of it was anger, part was guilt, but above all there was a feeling of exclusion. It was as if they had taken his grandmother from his hands and placed her on a pedestal he couldn't reach. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "If she goes ahead with this store, she'll expose my name even more. It will look like I'm the villain of the story, the grandson who tried to silence an old lady with a forced marriage." Jacob responded without hesitation. "It's not a matter of looking like it. That's exactly what you did. And now you need to decide if you're going to learn from it, or keep digging your own downfall." The next morning at the cottage, Martha appeared with a recipe notebook in hand, still with the old embroidered fabric cover. She sat next to Harry and began to show, one by one, her favorite creations. "This is the apple cake my mother used to make when someone was sad. This is the chocolate one I always wanted to sell. And this was what I wanted to prepare for Gregory on his birthday." Harry listened attentively without interrupting. When she finished, he stood up and said, smiling, "Let's turn this into something real. You've waited too long for permission. Now it's time to act." Martha nodded, moved. "I think, with you by my side, I can do anything." Back at the company, Gregory gathered his assistants and began making notes about permits, sanitary requirements, and municipal regulations. He was determined to make each step involving the possible opening of the bakery difficult. Jacob, seeing the movement, entered his office and crossed his arms. "I can't believe you're really going down this path. You're going to try to sabotage a lady over 70 years old?" Gregory raised his head, defiant. "She used my name. She embarrassed my image. This isn't about cakes, it's about control." Jacob approached the desk. "You didn't lose control, Gregory. You gave it away. When you treated your grandmother like a burden, you lost the right to decide what she does with the freedom she gained." That same night, in front of the cottage fireplace, Martha was finishing writing the last recipe in the notebook. She closed it carefully and rested her hands on the cover. Harry served 2 cups of tea and sat next to her in silence. "I don't think I ever imagined I would have a second chance, much less alongside someone like you." Harry, without taking his eyes off her, responded with sincerity. "And I never imagined that a cold contract would end up leading me to the truest thing I've ever experienced." She rested her head on his shoulder, peaceful. "Let's open this store. And when the doors open, I want everyone to know that my story is just beginning." The next morning, back at the mansion, Harry and Martha began organizing the first steps. They talked to old suppliers and visited a small commercial spot that she had known for years, but never had the courage to rent. When they signed the first intention papers, Martha could hardly believe it. Harry held her hand and said firmly, "We're going to build this, step by step. And no matter who tries to stop it, you will succeed." She smiled with teary eyes. "Gregory may try to stop us, but this time he no longer has power over me." And then, both looked at the empty space and imagined there the beginning of a new life. 2 weeks later, the sign was carefully hung over the light wooden entrance, "Vanilla Enchantments." The golden letters gleamed under the soft morning light. Inside the small bakery, the final adjustments were being made. The showcases were filled with pies, cakes, and cookies, all prepared by Martha, with Harry's attentive help. She wore a flowery apron and was arranging a tray of cupcakes when the first customer entered. Outside, cameras and microphones were positioned. The local press had been invited to record the day. "Let's do this our way, Harry. If it's going to work, it will be with love and truth." He smiled, holding the door. "Today is the first day of our new life, and no one is going to stop us." The journalists circulated through the environment with respect, enchanted by the welcoming atmosphere and the simplicity of the couple. Martha answered questions with sweetness, and Harry spoke little but firmly. Jacob arrived in the middle of the morning, surprising them both. He wore casual clothes and brought a gift box. Upon entering, he greeted both with a handshake. "I came to taste the famous cakes of Mrs. Martha, and also to talk about possibilities." Harry guided him to a table, and Martha brought a slice of apple pie. "It was always my best dessert, but today it tastes like victory." Jacob tasted it, closed his eyes, and nodded. "You know, the success of my company can come from unexpected places. I'm considering investing here." On the other side of the city, Gregory watched the live broadcast on the television in his room. The images showed Martha smiling while serving coffee to customers. Harry appeared in the background, collecting plates and cleaning tables. Jacob gave a brief interview, praising the strength of the initiative. Gregory turned off the television with a dry click and stared at the blank screen for a few seconds. His stomach felt queasy, as if something that still belonged to him had been invaded. She should be resting, not showing off. This is a circus built on my name. He got up abruptly and went to his desk. If you think you're going to turn my grandmother into a celebrity, you're very mistaken. The next day, during a meeting with shareholders, Gregory was pressured by declining numbers and poorly explained decisions. They questioned the company's image, now tarnished by public exposure and scandal. One of them, more direct, looked Gregory in the eye and said clearly, "You created an unnecessary crisis. Instead of protecting the company's name, you fueled a conflict that now harms us." Gregory tried to defend himself, claiming it was a personal matter. But another shareholder coldly retorted, "Personal matters that reach the press cease to be personal. And now, while your grandmother grows, we shrink." Gregory left the meeting with a tense jaw. If they want war, they'll get it. I just need to act from the shadows. That same week, the first strange signs began to appear in the bakery's routine. An inspector showed up with questions about documentation, claiming an anonymous complaint. Suppliers began delaying deliveries without explanations. A large sugar order never arrived. Martha, worried, tried to reorganize the stock, but realized something strange was happening. Harry began monitoring every call. Something's wrong. Someone is trying to sabotage us here. Martha looked at him with hands on her apron. Could Gregory do something like this? Harry responded with regret. He's done worse. Let's not wait for his next move. At the company headquarters, Gregory spoke on the phone with short, dry phrases. He gave instructions cautiously, demanding secrecy. He had hired an intermediary to hinder the bakery's operations without exposing himself. Everything should appear coincidental. After hanging up, he sat at his desk and opened a folder with the shop's documents. He was obsessed with every detail, studying ways to weaken the business. They think they can defeat me with flour and sugar? I'll show them how the real world works. He spent the night redoing calculations and sketching strategies to hinder Martha's operation. If she falls in silence and without blaming me. Meanwhile, at the bakery, Martha and Harry responded with creativity to the obstacles. When a supplier failed, they improvised with local ingredients. When inspectors arrived, they presented everything in order. The loyal public continued to visit. Many already knew their story and enthusiastically defended the place. Jacob reappeared at the end of a busy afternoon and sat with them. It seems someone doesn't want you to grow, but it also seems you won't stop. Martha looked at the oven where a cake was baking and responded firmly. For many years, I let them silence me. Now, my voice comes through the smell of sugar, Harry added, and whoever tries to erase that smell has already lost. The following weekend, the bakery organized a small social initiative, free cakes for children in the area. It was Martha's idea, who said that sweetness should reach those who need joy. The initiative attracted more press attention and generated positive comments on social media. Gregory, seeing another report about the entrepreneur grandmother, clenched his fists and violently closed his laptop. He picked up the phone and made a new call. "Starting tomorrow, I want you to increase the pressure. Make it seem like the business is illegal, dirty, anything, but I want that place empty." On the other side of the line, someone confirmed. Gregory put down the phone and thought aloud, "If I can't erase the past, I'll bury her present." The next morning, Martha found an anonymous note under the bakery door with veiled threats. Harry collected the paper and immediately tore it up. He's getting desperate, and the more desperate, the more predictable. Martha observed him with a serious face. "I think he doesn't just want to destroy the shop. He wants to destroy me, as if I were a disgrace." Harry held her hands firmly. "He's afraid of you, Martha. Afraid of what you represent. Freedom, courage, and truth." She took a deep breath, looking at the street through the shop window. "Then he better prepare himself, because we won't back down now." With the bakery crowded in the following days, the sabotage attempts lost strength in the face of popular support. Jacob scheduled a new meeting with Martha and Harry and brought a clear proposal. "I want to formalize a financial investment. This bakery will be more than a shop. It will be a symbol of overcoming, and Gregory will have no place in this future." Martha, with discreet tears in her eyes, accepted. "We're not doing this for revenge, we're doing it for everything that was denied to me." Harry looked at the clock, then at the crowded showcase. So let's start again. But now, with the right allies. And from there, the bakery grew not only in size but in significance. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Harry noticed that the usual delivery of eggs and butter had not arrived. He thought at first it was a common delay, but upon checking the list, he noticed it was the third supplier in a row that failed to fulfill their agreement. He picked up the phone and called one of those responsible directly. The voice on the other end was nervous, evasive. After some insistence, they released an uncomfortable phrase. "We received pressure from above, from someone with a lot of power. Better not to get involved anymore." Harry pressed the phone against his ear and responded firmly. "If they're trying to stop us, they've chosen the wrong path." Martha, overhearing the conversation, dropped the glass bowl she was carrying. The tremors returned suddenly, stronger than in recent days. She sat down slowly in a nearby chair, trying to control her breathing. Harry rushed to her, carefully holding her hands. "Calm down. It will pass. I'm here with you." Martha looked at him with teary eyes, her voice breaking. "I thought we had overcome everything, Harry, but it seems he won't stop." Harry crouched in front of her, fixing his gaze on hers. He still hasn't understood that he can't control us anymore, but he'll learn. That afternoon, Jacob showed up at the bakery without warning. He sensed the heavy atmosphere as soon as he crossed the door. Harry took him to the back and explained what was happening. He talked about the suppliers, the phone calls, and Martha's reaction. Jacob listened to everything carefully, his face serious. "Are you sure someone is behind this, someone specific?" Harry crossed his arms firmly. "I can't prove it yet, but I'm certain it's Gregory. He's behind this, manipulating everything as he always did." Jacob breathed deeply, shaking his head. "If it really is him, he's not just being cruel, he's being stupid." On the other side of town, Gregory was alone in his office, drinking cold coffee and looking at incomplete reports. He knew his influence was being questioned. When Jacob entered, he immediately stood up with an irritated expression. "Come to give me another moral lesson, or have you decided to endorse Grandma's cakes?" Jacob didn't react to the sarcasm. He just said what he needed to. "Things have gone too far. If this continues, not even the partners will stand by your side." Gregory walked to the window, his tone acidic. "You're on the wrong side, Jacob. You're defending someone who used my name to grow." Jacob responded without hesitation. "I'm on the side of truth and you're digging your own end." That same night, Gregory made one last call. He spoke in a low, direct voice, using words that made the tone of the instruction clear. He asked someone to go to the bakery during the night and ensure that some equipment was disabled. Nothing major, just enough to disrupt. After hanging up, he walked to the mirror and stared at himself for long seconds. They will learn that challenging Gregory comes with a price. Meanwhile, at the bakery, Harry was reviewing the camera system and reinforcing the locks. He suspected something bigger was coming. If he really does this, he'll leave traces. And this time, he'll pay completely. The following night, a hooded figure forced entry through the back of the bakery. He advanced quickly but with little skill. He tried to tamper with the power panel, then with the kitchen equipment. He didn't notice, however, that all cameras had been relocated by Harry. The system recorded each step of the intruder in high definition. In the morning, upon arriving and seeing the damaged lock, Harry knew he was right. He carefully collected the images, copied the files, and immediately called the police. "I have recordings of an attempted break-in, and I know who's behind it." Martha appeared at the door, worried. "It was him, wasn't it?" Harry confirmed with a look. "And now he's going to fall." With the evidence in hand, the police confirmed the identity of the intruder, an employee linked to Gregory's company. Jacob was called, watched the videos in silence, and nodded. It's more than enough. He gathered all the partners that same morning and presented the material without beating around the bush. He showed the faces, the records, the times. He explained how the sabotage was directly linked to Gregory's recent behavior. One of the older partners said in a firm tone, "He put everyone at risk. This is no longer an internal matter. It's a real threat." Jacob concluded the presentation by saying, "We need to act, and act now." At the bakery, Martha looked at the turned-off ovens, the stacked chairs, and the temporary notice on the door. The decision to close for a day had been difficult but necessary. She was afraid of losing everything they had achieved. Harry entered with 2 coffees and sat beside her. Everything is under control. The police are handling it, and Jacob has done his part. Martha held the mug with both hands, trying to contain the slight tremor. What if he manages to escape again? What if he finds another way to attack us? Harry looked into her eyes firmly. Now it's not just the 2 of us anymore. Now he's messed with people who can stop him. In the late afternoon, Gregory learned about the urgently convened assembly. He realized, even before confirming, that something had escaped his control. He tried to call 2 of the partners, but no one answered. Outside, as night fell, Martha turned on the light in the pastry shop's display window. Even though the store was closed, Harry observed in silence, respecting the gesture. She turned to him and said firmly, "Even if everything is lost tomorrow, I want people to know we didn't give up." Harry walked over to her, held her hand, and responded with his gaze fixed on hers. Nothing will be lost, because now, the truth is on our side. And for the first time in days, they both knew the fight was near its end. And that this time, Gregory would have nowhere else to run. The next morning, the company's meeting room was packed. The partners positioned themselves around the table, their faces bearing contained indignation. Gregory entered with rigid posture, as if he still had some control over the situation. Jacob was the first to stand up. With documents in hand, he initiated the formal vote. In minutes, the decision was unanimous. Gregory was removed from all positions. Not a single vote in his defense. The silence was broken only by Jacob's voice. The company can no longer be led by someone who acts against the very principles he claims to defend. Gregory remained motionless, then just murmured, "You'll regret this." After Gregory's departure, Jacob summoned the press and announced an unexpected measure. The company would make a significant investment in Martha's pastry shop, acknowledging the damage caused and publicly supporting a business based on truth and resilience. The gesture was applauded even by the most critical journalists. Jacob emphasized the importance of restoring the company's image with concrete actions, not excuses. This investment is not just financial, it's a symbol, a way of showing that we made mistakes and want to fix them. Behind the scenes, the move generated immediate positive repercussions. The pastry shop officially became the new symbol of rebirth in that story. Outside the headquarters, Gregory left the building with heavy steps. There was no team, no car, no defined destination. When he arrived at the mansion, he found correspondence on the living room table, an eviction notice. The accumulated debt, cut sponsorships, and lack of income made his stay there unfeasible. He threw the letter on the floor and looked around. The furniture, the paintings, the walls, everything seemed more distant now. He sat on the couch and murmured to himself, "What was it all for? Nothing left for me." The next morning he departed, carrying 2 suitcases, being observed by neighbors who avoided his gaze. The destination, a small apartment in an ordinary neighborhood. For the first time, Gregory was just a name among many. While he descended in the elevator with lowered eyes, on the other side of the city, the pastry shop prepared for a new inauguration, now with a renovated structure. The display windows shone, the facade had been repainted, and the sign gleamed even more. Martha wore her favorite apron and smiled as she hadn't smiled in many years. Harry organized the final details alongside Jacob, who remained discreet but attentive. Lines formed on the sidewalk, and reporters waited with cameras pointed at the entrance. When the doors opened, the reception was warm. "Welcome to the place where dreams are reborn," said Martha, opening her arms. Harry whispered in her ear, "Today the whole world is seeing who you've always been." News of the reopening was featured on portals and TV programs, while Gregory watched everything from the old television in his new apartment. Sitting in a simple chair, with dim light and a haggard face, he followed the images without being able to turn it off. He saw Martha distributing cake slices, Harry smiling at customers, and Jacob delivering a symbolic gift to the couple. No mention of him, no memory. The exclusion was complete. He leaned his head against the wall and murmured with a hoarse voice, "They erased me as if I had never been part of it." But deep down, he knew he had excluded himself long before it all began. A few days later, while sweeping the sidewalk of the pastry shop before opening, Martha saw Gregory standing across the street. He was thinner, with an unshaven beard and hands in his coat pockets. He didn't approach, he just observed. She crossed the street calmly and stopped in front of him. For seconds, neither said anything, until Gregory, in a low voice, asked, "Are you well?" Martha responded with tenderness, "I'm happy." He nodded, with tears welling in his eyes. "That's what I wanted. I just didn't know how to do it." The tears came silently, with no effort to contain them. Harry observed from a distance, standing by the pastry shop door, respecting the moment. Martha said goodbye to Gregory with a brief touch on his arm and returned to the other side of the street. Upon entering, she sat in the chair next to the counter and took off her apron for a moment. Harry sat beside her and held her hand. "Want to talk about it?" She smiled, but with sadness in her eyes. "I don't hold grudges. I just regret that he never accepted the love he always received." Harry pressed his forehead against hers and spoke sweetly. "Now you have a new story, and it's being written with your own hands." At the end of that week, Jacob appeared with a bag in hand. Inside, a special cake made by Martha, now the best-selling item in the store. It was a discreet celebration among friends, but full of meaning. They sat at the back table, and Jacob raised a slice before tasting it. "I never thought I'd eat something like this in a place I've financed with such satisfaction." Martha laughed, adjusting the tray on the tablecloth. "I never thought I'd be on the other side of the counter owning all this," Harry completed with a smile. "And to think it all started with a meaningless contract." Jacob looked at both of them and said, seriously, "You transformed a mistake into a miracle." After coffee, Harry suggested a new idea. He took Martha's old recipe notebook and placed it on the table. "What if we published this? A book with recipes, stories, memories." Martha opened the notebook delicately, her eyes illuminated by the proposal. "Each recipe has a story, some sad, others sweet, but all true." Jacob was already making mental notes. "We can handle the publication. It will be more than a book, it will be a legacy." Harry nodded. "It's no longer just about selling cakes. Yet it's about leaving something for the world, something that cannot be erased." And as customers entered the bakery again, smiling, talking, and enchanted by the sweet aroma in the air, Martha looked around with gratitude. The store, once a distant dream, was now a living reality. Harry washed baking pans at the counter. Jacob jotted down ideas for the book launch. And across the street, Gregory started walking again, alone, disappearing among the shadows of the buildings. But that afternoon, inside the bakery, there was only room for what was true, simple, and meaningful. And Martha, now stronger than ever, whispered to herself, "This is the story I always wanted to tell." Months later, the main bookstore's window in downtown caught attention with a single highlight: Grandma Martha's Recipes. The cover showed Martha's serene face holding an apple pie, the same one from the bakery, surrounded by drawings of her original notes. With support from the publisher recommended by Jacob, the book reached the shelves as a symbol of resilience, affection, and memory. During the launch, the line wrapped around the block and customers held copies with emotion. Martha signed with delicacy, telling each person that there was more than recipes there. Each page is a living memory, and every memory has a flavor. The expansion of the bakery was inevitable. The name became a registered trademark, and the demand for sweets grew every week. Harry and Martha chose a new location in the same city, a larger space with an area dedicated to children. There, the little ones could learn simple recipes, hear stories, and take their own little cakes home. At the inauguration of the new branch, Martha looked around and said quietly to Harry, "I never thought I'd come so far, and it all started with a shaky cake batter." Harry laughed and responded with affection. Shaky or not, it supported a revolution. In a simple office without wide windows, Gregory worked in silence. He worked as a consultant for small businesses, using his experience to try to guide beginning entrepreneurs. The desk was organized, but without any trace of personality. When turning on the television to fill the silence, he came across an interview with Martha. She was talking about the book, the new branch, and the public's affection. Gregory couldn't watch for long. He lowered his head, turned off the device, and remained silent. "She did everything without me, or perhaps despite me." Regret spread like a weight on his shoulders. That same afternoon, Gregory found a small box on his desk upon returning from lunch. It was wrapped in simple paper, without a sender. On top, the bakery's logo, Grandma Martha's Recipes. He picked it up slowly, as if he knew what to find inside. Upon opening it, the smell of fresh cake immediately spread throughout the room. Inside was a carefully wrapped slice, accompanied by a note with just 2 words: to remember. Gregory closed his eyes and brought the piece to his mouth. The taste was exactly as he remembered from childhood. Tears came without effort. She still offered me, even after everything. Outside the new branch, dozens of children played and got messy with chocolate. Harry organized cooking workshops, while Martha told stories aloud to a group gathered around colorful cushions. The pastry shop had become more than a business. It was now a place of collective affection. Loyal customers would enter with ready smiles. Others left notes thanking them for the memories that the flavors awakened. Martha, seeing all this, commented to Harry, "The kitchen became my voice, and the book, my second chance." He hugged her with pride in his gaze. "Now the whole world hears you, Martha." At the end of that day, Gregory walked by the new branch unnoticed. He stopped across the street and observed for a few minutes. He saw a child running with a gingerbread in hand, heard laughter, and caught a glimpse of Martha with her flowery apron, smiling as always. He didn't have the courage to approach. He just muttered to himself, "This is what she wanted to give me, and I didn't want it." After a few minutes, he turned and walked away, slow steps, head down. He knew that world was now inaccessible to him. And perhaps it was fair that way. Back in his small apartment, Gregory locked the door and dropped his keys on the table. The silence was thick. He sat down slowly on the couch, stared at the empty envelope from the cake box, and rested his elbows on his knees. For a long time he remained motionless with his eyes fixed on nothing. The smell of the sweet still lingered in the air, a reminder of what he had lost. He thought about everything that could have been different and whispered to himself, "She just wanted to be remembered, and I made her feel forgotten." And for the first time in a long time he stayed there, with nothing more to say. Did you like Gregory and Martha's story? Then subscribe to the channel, comment which city you're watching this beautiful story from, leave your like and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on screen. I'll see you there. The rain beat persistently on the windows of the small 2-bedroom house, where Margaret, a 40-year-old woman with brown hair already showing the first premature grey strands, folded work uniforms on the time-stained kitchen table. Her brown eyes, though deeply tired and marked by purple dark circles, still shone even when her body begged for rest. With precise but slow movements, she sorted clothes for her 3 different jobs. The faded blue uniform for morning cleaning at the downtown office, the once white, now yellowed apron from the busy lunch diner, and the red blouse with the logo of the supermarket where she worked until the early hours of the morning. Her hands, rough and calloused from constant work with chemicals and excessive weight, trembled slightly as she checked the schedules meticulously noted in a worn notebook, its yellowed pages filled with budget calculations and reminders of bills to pay. Alexander, her 15-year-old son with features reminiscent of his deceased father, studied concentrated at the living room table, completely oblivious to the silent and heroic sacrifices happening just a few meters away. "Mom, are you okay? You look more tired today than yesterday," said Alexander, raising concerned eyes from his math books, noticing his mother's trembling hands. "I'm great, my love. Just a little normal fatigue from work. Keep studying. You need to pass the entrance exam and achieve all your dreams." Margaret forced a smile, hiding the pain that had been throbbing in her chest for weeks, while carefully storing the sale documents of the land in the bottom of a warped drawer of the old dresser, those yellowed papers representing the only inheritance left by her parents. A piece of fertile and well-located land worth exactly enough to fully pay for the business administration degree that Alexander had dreamed of pursuing since childhood. She had crafted a careful lie for her son, inventing a story about an academic merit scholarship, when in fact she had sold the cherished land to an unscrupulous developer who would build a residential complex on the sacred place where she played as a child, where she learned to ride a bicycle, and where her parents taught her about honesty and hard work. The emotional weight of this decision squeezed her chest like a closed fist, making her wake up in the middle of the night with her heart racing. But Margaret knew deep in her soul that it was the only possible way to give her son the bright future he deserved, and for which she was willing to sacrifice everything. Her nights were filled with endless numbers and complicated accounts, obsessively calculating every penny earned and spent so that Alexander would never suspect the painful truth behind his education. "Promise me you'll always be honest with me, Alexander." "Honesty is a family's most valuable treasure," murmured Margaret, watching her son concentrated on his studies with a mixture of pride and melancholy. "Of course, Mum. I've always been honest with you. But why are you saying this now? Did something happen that should worry me?" Oastutudi, 3 months later, on a particularly stormy night that seemed to reflect the internal chaos of her life, Margaret arrived home after an especially exhausting shift at the supermarket, carrying heavy shopping bags she got with her employee discount, feeling the world violently spinning around her as if she were on an out-of-control carousel. Her legs, which had supported her through 16 consecutive hours of work on that hellish day, simply gave way at the kitchen doorstep, and she lost her strength and fell, fainting on the threshold, her belongings scattering across the floor, pain medications and a few coins across the floor soaked by the rain coming through the poorly closed window. Alexander found his mother a few hours later, when he returned from a study group at a classmate's house, and saw her pale as paper, breathing with frightening difficulty and moaning softly in a state of semi-consciousness, which made him immediately call an ambulance in complete despair, his hands trembling so much he almost dropped the phone. In the crowded public hospital with a strong smell of disinfectant, the on-duty doctor, a middle-aged man with a serious and tired expression, explained in technical terms that Margaret suffered from a severe and potentially fatal heart condition, most likely aggravated by chronic stress, poor nutrition and extreme physical and emotional exhaustion that her body simply could no longer endure. "Mrs. Margaret, you need to understand the severity of the situation. You need to stop working immediately and follow a rigorous treatment," said the doctor, adjusting his glasses and flipping through the medical chart with evident concern. "Doctor, I cannot stop working even for a day. My son needs to study, needs to have a better future than mine, and I am all he has in the world." But Margaret, driven by a fierce and irrational maternal love that overcame any basic instinct of self-preservation, completely and deliberately ignored all serious medical recommendations, as if the doctor's words were merely optional suggestions and not a matter of life and death. The morning after her hospital discharge, still feeling dizzy and with chest pains radiating down her left arm, she was again on her feet before dawn, meticulously preparing Alexander's nutritious breakfast with the few ingredients she had at home and getting dressed in pressed clothes to go to the first of 3 jobs awaiting her. She hid the expensive and essential medications in an old dusty cosmetics box stored at the back of the bathroom cabinet and blatantly lied about follow-up medical appointments, telling her worried son they were just preventive routine exams that all women her age needed to have regularly. Each day that slowly passed, Margaret felt her heart failing a bit more, the palpitations becoming more frequent and intense, but she continued to force a smile and work non-stop, fueled exclusively by the burning and unwavering hope of seeing Alexander graduated, successful and happy, even if it cost her own life. The years dragged on like this, heavy as lead, with Margaret carrying completely alone the terrible burden of her deteriorating health condition, while investing every precious drop of her remaining vital energy in the promising future of the son she loved more than her own existence. "Mom, are you absolutely sure you're okay?" "Sometimes you get short of breath and put your hand on your chest," Alexander asked one of those mornings, with the penetrating look of someone beginning to suspect. "It's just accumulated fatigue from work, dear. Nothing a little rest won't fix. Soon you'll graduate from college and we can rest together, maybe even travel a bit." 20 years passed like a nebulous blur of hard work, constant sacrifice, and unconditional love that never faltered even for a moment. Margaret, now a dignified 60-year-old lady with completely grey hair styled in a simple but careful manner, and deep wrinkles marking each year of tireless struggle on her face, walked slowly through the endless corridors of polished marble in the imposing mansion that Alexander had built with the resounding success of his prosperous and nationally recognized management company. Her hands, once rough and calloused from heavy manual labor, now constantly trembled, not just from the accumulated fatigue of decades, but from advanced age and the serious heart condition she had never adequately treated due to lack of resources and time. Alexander completely transformed into a respected millionaire businessman of 35, tall and elegant in his custom-made suits crafted by the best tailors in the city, had married 5 years ago to Victoria, a stunning 30-year-old woman with perfectly arranged blonde hair in sophisticated styles, always impeccable nails done weekly at the best salons, and a calculated smile that never reached her cold eyes when she looked directly at her mother-in-law with barely disguised disdain. The mansion was a true palace of luxury and ostentation, with breathtaking landscaped gardens, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and a panoramic view of the city. But for Margaret, it often seemed more like a golden prison where she could not find her place or feel truly welcome. "Margaret, could you avoid walking barefoot through the house? It's so rustic and inappropriate for our social position," Victoria commented coldly, examining her own freshly done nails as if they were works of art. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I've always walked like this at home since childhood. It's an old habit I have difficulty changing. I'll try to wear slippers from now on." Face, Victoria never missed a single opportunity to make subtly cruel and venomous comments about her mother-in-law, always with a tone of aristocratic superiority that cut like a sharp blade through Margaret's dignity. She mercilessly criticized the way Margaret dressed, calling her simple but clean clothes outdated and embarrassing, cruelly mocked her humble way of speaking, calling it clumsy and classless, and constantly suggested to Alexander, in front of important visitors, that his mother was losing her mind with age when Margaret forgot some completely unimportant detail or confused the name of an occasional guest. Alexander, completely absorbed by the complex business and demanding social commitments that his prominent position in society imposed, rarely noticed these veiled and systematic psychological aggressions, or when he eventually noticed something strange in his wife's behavior, he consciously chose to ignore it to maintain domestic peace and avoid conflicts that could affect his carefully constructed public image. Margaret endured everything in absolute silence, swallowing each painful humiliation, as she had swallowed endless years of physical pain and extreme fatigue, always inflexibly prioritizing her son's happiness and well-being above her own personal dignity and shattered self-esteem. "Alexander, your mother left water running in the bathroom again this morning. She's becoming very careless lately. Perhaps she needs professional help," Victoria reported during the elegant dinner, delicately cutting a piece of salmon. "My mother has always been a careful and responsible person, Victoria. I'm sure it was just a minor accident of no importance. We all make small mistakes sometimes." So on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, while Victoria had gone out for an extended session at the most expensive beauty salon in the city for aesthetic treatments, and Alexander was in a crucial business meeting with international investors, Margaret lovingly decided to bring fresh coffee and some homemade cookies to his office, as she occasionally did since coming to live in the mansion. A small gesture of maternal care that made her feel useful and connected to her son. The room was absolutely imposing and intimidating, decorated with tall bookshelves of imported noble wood, original paintings by renowned artists that cost more than an entire house, a gigantic mahogany executive desk where Alexander conducted million-dollar business deals that moved unimaginable fortunes, and business recognition trophies shining under the golden light that entered through the enormous windows overlooking the city. It was then that Margaret, while carefully placing the tray on a free corner of the desk, noticed some important documents purposefully spread across the waxed surface, official papers with impressive corporate logos and legal stamps that immediately caught her experienced attention from someone who had worked in offices for years. Approaching with natural curiosity and instinctive maternal concern, she immediately recognized the familiar name of the first company Alexander had founded, with much sweat and determination, using the initial investments obtained thanks to the secret and sacrificial sale of her precious inheritance. The company that had immeasurable and irreplaceable sentimental value, as it concretely represented her son's decisive first step toward the extraordinary success she had always dreamed for him. "This cannot be happening to the company we built together," Margaret murmured softly, holding the papers with visibly trembling hands and racing heart, I urgently need to discover what is happening behind the scenes before it's too late to prevent some financial tragedy. Margaret meticulously examined each page of the complex documents with redoubled attention, her tired but still perceptive eyes straining intensely to understand all the complicated legal technical terms and contractual clauses full of specialized language that seemed purposefully confusing. The company would be sold for an alarmingly below-market value to a competitor nationally known for unfair and unethical business practices, and all preliminary signatures were already mysteriously in advanced progress, with only a few final documents missing to complete the irreversible transaction. What disturbed her most deeply and made her heart race dangerously was gradually discovering that the documents contained highly confidential and strategic information that only someone extremely close to Alexander, with privileged access to the most intimate business secrets, could have obtained and passed on to interested buyers. Margaret felt an explosive mixture of panic, betrayal, and maternal indignation as she slowly realized that someone from within the family circle was deliberately betraying her son's sacred trust, cowardly selling not just a profitable company, but precious years of hard work, complete dedication, and dreams fulfilled through much effort and personal sacrifice. She mentally recorded all important details and relevant numbers, memorizing crucial names, values, and dates, and decided with unwavering determination that she urgently needed to confront the person responsible for this despicable betrayal before it was too late to completely prevent the consummation of this criminal transaction. Who would have the courage and coldness to do such terrible things to Alexander after everything he has honestly achieved? Margaret thought anxiously, feeling her chest dangerously tighten with anxiety. I need to protect my son in any way possible, as I have always done throughout life, even if it costs me my own existence. Just when Victoria finally returned from the beauty salon 2 hours later, proudly displaying a new modern haircut that had cost a small fortune and freshly done nails with sophisticated artistic design, Margaret was patiently waiting in the luxurious living room with the incriminating documents in hand. Sitting in an Italian leather armchair with a serious and determined expression she rarely showed. Victoria entered the mansion laughing loudly on her golden phone, animatedly talking about an extravagant charity party she would organize at the end of the month to impress high society. But her radiant and artificial smile instantly disappeared, as if it had been erased by a breaking light upon seeing her mother-in-law sitting there, with a dignified yet threatening posture. Margaret rose slowly from the armchair, feeling her legs tremble like leaves in the wind, but proudly maintaining the natural dignity that had always characterized her, even in the most difficult and humiliating moments of her trial-filled life. She extended the papers toward her daughter-in-law with a firm and controlled gesture, carefully observing every micro-expression on Victoria's perfectly made-up face, desperately looking for revealing signs of guilt, nervousness, or any reaction that could confirm her growing suspicions about who was really behind this devastating family betrayal that could destroy everything Alexander had tirelessly worked for over decades. Victoria, I urgently need to talk to you about these extremely important documents I found in Alexander's private office, Margaret said, with a firm but respectful voice, maintaining a civilized tone. Do you know anything concrete about this mysterious sale of the company that has so much sentimental and financial value for him and our entire family? Victoria's face changed instantly, moving from initial surprise to an expression of barely disguised fury. She advanced toward Margaret with quick, decisive steps, her high heels echoing on the marble floor like hammer blows. Without any ceremony, Victoria brusquely took the papers from her mother-in-law's hands, making Margaret back away frightened, and in the sudden movement, one of the sheets accidentally tore, leaving pieces of paper scattered on the floor. Victoria's eyes shone with a rage she had never shown so openly, and her voice came out in a strident scream that echoed throughout the mansion, finally revealing her true cruel and manipulative nature. You were messing with my husband's things. What else did you take, you meddling old woman? Victoria yelled, pointing an accusing finger at Margaret. How long have you been snooping around where you shouldn't, hoping no one notices your little investigations? Margaret remained motionless for a few seconds, processing her daughter-in-law's sudden and disproportionate aggressiveness, feeling a mixture of shock and indignation at that violent reaction that seemed to have been previously rehearsed. The atmosphere in the room changed completely, as if a storm had entered through the front door, and Margaret realized she was facing a Victoria completely different from the calculating but contained woman she had known for years. The torn pieces of paper on the floor seemed to symbolize much more than a simple accident. They represented the definitive rupture of any pretense of civility between the two women, and Margaret instinctively felt that this moment would mark the beginning of something much more sinister and dangerous. Victoria remained standing, breathing heavily with clenched fists and an expression of barely disguised triumph in her eyes, as if she had finally found the perfect excuse she had been looking for so long to justify her growing hostility against the unwanted mother-in-law. "Victoria, please calm down. We can talk about this in a civilized manner, without shouting or aggression," Margaret said with a trembling but firm voice. "I didn't come here to create problems. I just want to protect my son from any situation that could harm him or put at risk everything he has built." Margaret stepped back a few paces, feeling her heart dangerously accelerate and her blood pressure rise alarmingly, but maintained her dignity even in the face of her daughter-in-law's unreasonable aggression. She breathed deeply, trying to control the situation that was quickly getting out of hand, and responded with the tranquility of someone who had faced much more difficult situations throughout a life of sacrifices and hardships. However, something in Victoria's calculating eyes warned her that this argument wasn't just about the documents found. There was a more sinister intention behind that exaggerated reaction, as if Victoria had been waiting precisely for an opportunity like this to execute a previously elaborated plan. Margaret realized she was being manipulated, but still couldn't imagine how far her daughter-in-law's cruelty could go, nor the extremes to which she would be willing to go to get rid of the unwanted presence of her mother-in-law in the luxurious mansion. "Victoria, I'm only concerned about Alexander's well-being and wanted to understand what was happening with his company," Margaret explained calmly, trying to appease the situation. "I had no intention of invading your privacy, but as a mother, I have the right to worry about my son and protect him from any danger." In the hours that followed, Victoria put into practice a diabolical plan she had architected months ago, waiting only for the perfect moment to execute it with surgical precision. She discreetly took one of her most valuable jewels, a stunning diamond necklace that Alexander had given her as a wedding present, a unique piece valued at hundreds of thousands that symbolized the love and trust between the couple, and carefully hid it in Margaret's modest room, placing it inside a drawer among the mother-in-law's simple clothes. The jewel was strategically positioned to make it seem as if it had been hastily hidden, as if someone had tried to conceal the stolen object but hadn't managed to find a safer place to keep it. Victoria then returned to her room, pretended to desperately search for the jewel, and began a calculated scandal, shouting and crying like a consummate actress playing the role of an innocent victim of a heinous crime committed inside her own home. "Alexander, Alexander, my diamond necklace is gone, the one you gave me at our wedding?" Victoria shouted theatrically, running through the corridors of the mansion. "Someone entered our room and stole the most precious jewel I have. How could this have happened in our own home?" That same night, Alexander had organized an important dinner with influential international investors, powerful businessmen who could determine the future of his business and significantly expand his financial empire to global markets. The table in the main hall was elegantly set with the best crystal, gleaming silverware, and sophisticated floral arrangements that cost more than the monthly salary of many families, creating an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication that would impress even the most demanding guests accustomed to ostentation. Margaret, wearing her best dress, simple but clean and well-maintained, had respectfully joined the dinner as Alexander had requested, sitting discreetly at one end of the table so as not to draw unnecessary attention to herself. The guests were animatedly discussing business, economic policy, and investment opportunities, while Margaret listened silently, proud to see how her son had become a respected and successful man in the world of international business. "Gentlemen, I would like to introduce my mother, Margaret, who has always been my greatest inspiration and support in all difficult moments," Alexander said politely to the investors. "Everything I've accomplished today, I owe to the teachings and sacrifices she made for me throughout my entire life, and I am very proud to have her here with us." It was exactly in the middle of dinner, When the investors were most relaxed and impressed with the hospitality and sophisticated environment, that Victoria executed the cruelest part of her Machiavellian plan. She abruptly stood up from the table, interrupting an important conversation about a multi-million-dollar business merger, and began to cry copiously, drawing the attention of everyone present with a performance worthy of theatrical awards. With a choked voice and trembling hands, she told the shocked guests about the theft of her most precious jewel, describing in detail the sentimental and financial value of the piece, and suggesting with tears in her eyes that someone from the household itself had committed this terrible crime against the family. The investors became visibly uncomfortable with the embarrassing situation, whispering among themselves and exchanging looks of surprise and judgment, while Alexander felt his carefully built reputation beginning to crumble before his eyes. "Please, Victoria, let's resolve this after dinner. Our guests don't need to worry about domestic matters." Alexander tried to control the situation, visibly nervous. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation for this. Perhaps you've just forgotten where you put the jewel. These things happen to all of us." But Victoria didn't stop her convincing performance. On the contrary, she intensified the drama of the situation even more, rising from her chair and walking theatrically around the room like a desperate and betrayed woman. She then suggested, with a false innocence that only Margaret could perceive, that perhaps they should search for the jewel in all the rooms of the house, starting with her mother-in-law's room, since she had been seen meddling with things she shouldn't during the afternoon. The investors, already completely involved in the unexpected family drama, agreed it was a sensible idea, and some even offered to help with the search, transforming the business dinner into an amateur police investigation. Margaret felt her blood freeze in her veins as she realized where the situation was heading, but still maintained her composure and agreed to allow the search of her room, confident that nothing would be found because she would never take something that didn't belong to her. "I have nothing to hide, and I accept that you search my room. My conscience is clear," Margaret said with dignity, rising from the table. "I have always taught my son about honesty and would never do anything that contradicted the values I tried to pass on to him throughout his life." The embarrassing procession headed to Margaret's modest bedroom, located in a simpler wing of the mansion, far from the luxurious quarters of the main couple. Victoria led the group with convincing tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, followed by the curious and uncomfortable investors, Alexander with an expression of growing concern, and Margaret walking with the dignity of someone who had nothing to fear. When they reached the room, Victoria immediately went to the old dresser where Margaret kept her few clothes, and with a precision too suspicious to be coincidence, opened exactly the drawer where she had strategically hidden the diamond necklace a few hours earlier. The cry of discovery she let out upon finding the jewel was so loud and dramatic that it echoed throughout the wing of the mansion, and immediately all eyes turned to Margaret with a mixture of shock, disappointment, and silent judgment that cut through the poor lady's heart like a sharp dagger. "My God, here is my necklace! It was hidden among her clothes!" Victoria exclaimed theatrically, holding the jewel as evidence of a crime. "How could you do this to me, Margaret? How could you steal something so precious and meaningful from your own family?" Margaret was completely stunned, as if she were in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. Her legs trembled so much that she could barely stand, and her already fragile cardiac heart began to beat irregularly and dangerously, sending waves of pain through her chest and left arm. She vehemently denied the accusation, with a voice that trembled not from guilt, but from deep indignation and devastating emotional shock, trying to explain to all present that she would never touch something that didn't belong to her, that she had been raised with solid values of honesty and integrity that she would never abandon. But Victoria did not allow her mother-in-law to defend herself adequately, interrupting each attempt at explanation with new, even more serious accusations, dramatically mentioning that Margaret had been seen tampering with confidential documents in Alexander's office, suggesting a pattern of suspicious and invasive behavior that painted a terrible picture of the accused's personality. "I swear on the memory of my parents, and by all that is sacred, that I never took this jewel. Someone is lying here," Margaret desperately protested, her hands trembling. "Alexander, my son, you've known me all your life. How can you believe that I would be capable of stealing anything from you?" But Alexander, pressured by the embarrassing social situation and concerned above all with his professional image before the important investors who could make or break his future business, did not immediately defend his mother as she expected and deserved. Instead, he remained silent for long agonizing seconds, clearly torn between filial love and the social and financial pressures that weighed on his shoulders like an immovable mountain. The investors murmured among themselves, visibly uncomfortable with the domestic situation that had exploded right in front of them, and some were already discreetly signaling that perhaps it would be better to end the meeting and discuss business at a more appropriate time. Victoria realized she had Alexander exactly where she wanted him, vulnerable, pressured, and willing to do anything to save his business reputation, even if it meant sacrificing his own mother on the altar of social convenience and financial success. "Alexander, you need to take decisive action now. Everyone is seeing what happened here. How are you going to handle this situation?" Victoria pressed, placing her hand on her husband's shoulder. "Your company, your reputation, everything is at stake. The investors are watching how you resolve family problems. Show what kind of leader you are." The psychological and social pressure finally broke Alexander's resistance, and he exploded in a fury that combined public shame, business pressure, and emotional manipulation skillfully orchestrated by his calculating wife. He turned to his mother with an expression of anger and disappointment that Margaret had never seen in his loving eyes, and his voice came out in a loud, harsh tone that cut her heart more deeply than any physical dagger could have done. In front of all the embarrassed investors, the employees who had gathered discreetly in the hallway to witness the family drama, and Victoria, who could barely hide a triumphant smile behind her fake tears, Alexander uttered the most painful words Margaret had ever heard in her entire life of suffering and sacrifice. The environment fell completely silent after the shout, as if even the walls of the mansion were shocked by the cruelty of that moment that would forever change the dynamics of that destroyed family. "You are a thief. Get out of this house. I can no longer have someone I cannot trust living under my roof," Alexander shouted, pointing to the door. "After everything I've done for you, after all the affection I've given you, this is how you repay me. Leave my house right now." Margaret felt a deep pain in her chest, both emotional and physical, her heart condition intensely manifesting in the face of unbearable emotional pain. The cruel words of the son she had raised with so much love and sacrifice hit her like precise bullets, each word echoing in her mind like a death sentence for all the dreams and hopes she had nurtured during decades of hard work. Unable to utter a single word of defense or farewell, she slowly walked to her room under the judgmental gazes of all those present, gathered only some basic clothes in a small worn leather suitcase she had bought decades ago, and left the luxurious mansion that she had never really considered her home. The rain that had begun to fall during the night created a perfect melancholic atmosphere for that moment of absolute desolation, and Margaret walked out the front door without looking back, carrying only her wounded dignity and the crushing weight of family betrayal. "My God, what did I do wrong to deserve this? How can the son I raised with so much love treat me like this?" Margaret thought, walking slowly through the rain. "Perhaps it's better this way. Perhaps I really don't belong in this world of luxury and falsehood that I no longer recognize." Margaret walked alone through the deserted streets of the rainy dawn, each step weighing like lead, while the icy rain penetrated her simple clothes and wet her gray hair, creating small streams that ran down her face, mixing with the silent tears that finally began to fall after being contained for so long. The small suitcase she carried seemed to weigh tons, not because of its material content, but because of the painful symbolism of an entire life being reduced to a few pieces of clothing and personal objects with no monetary value but full of precious memories. Her legs, already weakened by age and neglected health problems, began to progressively fail, and she felt her chest tighten in a different and more intense way than any previous pain, as if an invisible hand was squeezing her heart with increasing force. The street was completely deserted at that hour of the dawn, with no cars passing by nor pedestrians who could offer help, and Margaret realized that she was completely alone in the world for the first time in her life, with nowhere to go and no one to trust. "I can't give up now. I need to find a place to spend the night, and then figure out what to do with the rest of my life," Margaret murmured to herself, fighting against the growing pain. Alexander may have thrown me out, but I still have dignity and strength to survive, as I have always done throughout my life of hardships. It was then that the pain in her chest suddenly intensified alarmingly, radiating through her left arm and up to her neck, while an overwhelming sensation of dizziness took over her entire body, already debilitated by decades of excessive work and accumulated emotional stress. Margaret tried to support herself on a nearby lamppost, but her legs gave way completely, and she collapsed on the wet asphalt of the deserted street, her small suitcase opening and scattering her few belongings across the soaked sidewalk like pathetic symbols of a life of sacrifices that had apparently ended in abandonment and loneliness. Her old and simple cell phone fell far from her trembling hands, sliding a few meters across the wet surface until it stopped under a parked car, and its cracked screen still displayed an old, faded photo of her with Alexander as a child, both smiling happily in simpler times when the love between mother and son was pure and unconditional. The night was slowly advancing, and no car passed through that quiet residential street. No pedestrian walked by at that late hour, and Margaret remained unconscious on the cold, wet ground, completely invisible and forgotten by the world that continued to spin indifferent to her suffering. Please let someone find me. I still have so much to live for, so much to clarify, Margaret thought in her last moments of consciousness, looking up at the rainy sky. Alexander, my boy, forgive your mother for not being strong enough to prove my innocence. I love you more than my own life. The first ray of sunlight of the morning weakly illuminated Margaret's pale face, still unconscious on the wet asphalt, when a neighbor from the street, a middle-aged woman called Mrs. Nancy by the residents of the neighborhood, went out to get the newspaper and saw that disturbing scene of an elderly woman fallen on the sidewalk. Mrs. Nancy immediately ran back inside her house shouting for her husband, who called emergency services, while she tried to check if Margaret was still breathing, carefully placing a coat over the cold body of the stranger. The ambulance arrived in a few minutes, and the paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Margaret, who still showed weak but constant vital signs, before transporting her to the nearest public hospital. During the frantic journey through the awakening city, Margaret floated between consciousness and unconsciousness, occasionally murmuring Alexander's name between heartbreaking moans of pain that broke the hearts of the professionals trying to keep her alive. Please stay with me, ma'am. We're taking you to receive all necessary medical care, said the paramedic, monitoring her vital signs. Is there someone we can call to inform about your condition? Any close family member who should know that you are here? At the hospital, Margaret was immediately directed to the cardiac intensive care unit, where a specialized medical team worked tirelessly for several hours to stabilize her critical condition and prevent her already weakened heart from completely stopping. The tests revealed that she had suffered a severe acute myocardial infarction, complicated by a pre-existing heart condition that had been neglected for decades, and the doctors explained to the nursing staff that it would be a miracle if she survived the next crucial 48 hours. Among the nurses assigned to care for Margaret was Lisa, a young professional of 25, with brown hair tied in a practical bun and gentle eyes that showed genuine concern for each patient under her care. When Lisa saw Margaret's face for the first time, something familiar awakened in her memory, as if she were looking at a ghost from the past that had deeply marked her adolescence. Wait a moment. I know this face from somewhere important in my life, Lisa murmured to herself, carefully studying Margaret's features. Where have I seen this woman before? Why do I feel that she was very special to me at some point? In the following hours, while meticulously caring for Margaret, checking her vital signs, administering medications, and adjusting the equipment that kept her alive, Lisa gradually began to remember specific details that confirmed her growing suspicions. 10 years ago, when Lisa was only 15 and her own mother was dying of cancer, in an overcrowded and resource-starved public hospital, a kind and attentive woman had appeared like a guardian angel in their lives, devastated by tragedy and despair. This woman, who worked as a cleaner at the hospital during the midnight shift, always found time to talk kindly with Lisa's mother, brought her small comforts like hot tea and homemade cookies, and offered words of encouragement when the doctors had no more hope to offer. Margaret had been that comforting and maternal presence who made the last months of Lisa's mother's life more dignified and less lonely. And now fate had placed the two women together again in completely different but equally dramatic circumstances. "My God, it is you. The woman who cared for my mother when I needed support and affection the most," Lisa exclaimed emotionally, gently holding Margaret's hand. "Now it's my turn to return all the kindness you showed us in those very difficult moments of our life." When Margaret finally awoke 3 days later, still weak and confused but out of immediate danger, Lisa was by her side holding her hand with the same maternal care that Margaret had shown so many years ago. Margaret tried to speak, but her voice came out hoarse and almost inaudible due to days of intubation and heavy medications, so Lisa gently explained where she was, what had happened, and how a charitable neighbor had saved her life by finding her unconscious on the street during that rainy and desperate early morning. When Margaret weakly asked if anyone had called looking for her, if Alexander had tried to locate her, or shown any concern about her sudden disappearance, Lisa had to give the devastating news that no one had sought information about a missing elderly woman, and that she had remained an unidentified patient until she was able to provide her own personal information. The emotional pain of this revelation was almost as intense as the physical pain of the heart attack, and Margaret cried silently for hours, realizing that she had been completely abandoned by the son she raised with so much love and dedication. "No one asked about me? Not even a call or a visit in all these days?" Margaret asked with a voice broken by emotional pain. "How is it possible that my own son didn't miss me or worry about my well-being after throwing me out like that?" Lisa, moved by the same compassion that Margaret had shown years ago and by indignation at the cruelty of the situation, decided not only to professionally care for the patient, but also to offer a temporary home where Margaret could properly recover after being discharged. She lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, a simple but welcoming space that she had decorated with plants and family photographs, and insisted that Margaret stay in the guest room for as long as necessary for her complete recovery. When they were discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later, with Margaret still very fragile but clinically stable, Lisa took her home and comfortably settled her in the room arranged with special care, providing all necessary medications and establishing a care routine that would ensure the gradual but consistent recovery of Margaret's physical and emotional health. During the first days in the apartment, Margaret remained mostly in bed, still emotionally processing the trauma of family abandonment, but gradually began to take interest in household activities and long conversations with Lisa about their respective lives and experiences. "Lisa, you barely know me and yet you're doing all this for me. How can I repay such kindness?" Margaret asked, watching the young woman prepare a medicinal tea. "You're giving me much more than a roof over my head. You're restoring my hope that good people still exist in this world." It was during one of these intimate and comforting conversations that Margaret discovered an extraordinary coincidence that would completely change the course of their lives. Lisa worked part-time as an administrative secretary in one of the offices that managed the financial and bureaucratic operations of Alexander's business empire. She had secured this additional job to supplement her income as a nurse and pay for the specialization courses she intended to take. And although she had no direct contact with Alexander, she had access to many documents, correspondence, and confidential information that circulated through the company's administrative departments. Lisa explained that she had always found strange the increasing volume of documentation related to sales and asset transfers that crossed her desk in recent weeks, especially considering that Alexander had a reputation for being extremely cautious and conservative in his important business decisions. Margaret felt her heart dangerously accelerate upon hearing this information, realizing that she might have found a way to discover what was really happening with her son's companies and who was behind the suspicious transactions she had discovered in those fateful documents. "You have access to documents and correspondence from Alexander's company. This could be the key to discovering the truth," Margaret exclaimed, feeling a spark of hope. "Perhaps we can understand what's really happening and protect my son from this trap before it's too late." In the following days, Lisa began paying special attention to the documents she processed at work, and soon discovered a disturbing pattern of communications between Victoria and representatives of a competing company known for aggressive and questionable business practices. The emails that passed through her desk revealed extremely detailed secret negotiations about the acquisition of various companies in Alexander's group at values significantly below market price. And most shocking was that Victoria was providing strategic, confidential information that only someone with intimate access to business secrets could know. Lisa also discovered that there was an offshore bank account in Victoria's name that was receiving substantial transfers from the purchasing company, clearly configuring a scheme of corruption and betrayal that would put Alexander at risk, not only financially but also legally, if authorities discovered his involuntary participation in these fraudulent transactions. When Lisa showed these evidences to Margaret, both were shocked by the depth of the betrayal and the sophistication of the scheme Victoria had architected to destroy Alexander while enriching herself at his expense. "Look at these emails, Margaret. Victoria is selling your son's companies for her own financial benefit." Lisa showed the printed documents with indignation. "She's not just a cruel wife. She's a calculating criminal who is systematically stealing the family's assets." While organizing the few belongings she had brought from the mansion, Margaret found in a side pocket of her suitcase a small portable storage device that she had completely forgotten she owned, an old device she used years ago to store important digitized documents when she still worked in administrative offices. Curious and with a strange feeling that it might be important, she asked Lisa to connect the device to the computer, and both were impressed to discover that it contained a detailed file of all documentation related to the sacrifices Margaret had made for Alexander over the years. There were digitized old medical reports proving her neglected heart condition, documents of the sale of land inherited from her parents, payment records from the 3 jobs she maintained simultaneously, receipts of Alexander's college tuition payments, and even photographs of her working exhaustively in different locations during all those years of unconditional maternal dedication. These documents were the concrete and irrefutable proof that Margaret had literally sacrificed everything: her health, her inheritance, her youth, and her own dreams, to ensure that Alexander would have the opportunities she never had. "My God, Margaret, you have here the proof of all the sacrifices you made for Alexander over decades," Lisa exclaimed, seeing the images and documents. "This is more than enough evidence to show the entire world who you really are and what you've done for your family." Determined to discover the full extent of Victoria's betrayal, Margaret and Lisa decided to investigate more deeply the suspicious contacts and activities that appeared in the corporate emails. Using the research skills Lisa had developed during her nursing studies and Margaret's administrative experience, they managed to trace connections that revealed an even more complex and shocking network of corruption than they had initially imagined. They discovered that Victoria maintained a secret love affair with Charles, a senior executive at the competing company that was orchestrating the hostile takeover of Alexander's businesses, and that the two lovers had planned not only to steal the business assets, but also to marry after Victoria asked Alexander for divorce, once all the fraudulent transactions were completed. The plan was diabolically simple: financially destroy Alexander through forced sales, transfer the assets to accounts controlled by Charles and Victoria, and then abandon Alexander bankrupt and publicly humiliated, taking a stolen fortune to start a new luxurious life in another country where they could not be easily located by authorities. "So Victoria isn't just stealing, she has a lover who is a partner in this criminal scheme," Margaret said with growing indignation. "They plan to completely destroy my son to get rich at the expense of his work and dedication." While Margaret and Lisa worked feverishly to organize all the evidence they had collected and to develop a plan to publicly expose Victoria's criminal scheme before it was too late to save Alexander, they simultaneously received 2 devastating news items that transformed their mission of justice into a desperate race against time. First, Lisa discovered through her contacts at the office that Alexander had signed the preliminary documents for the sale of his main companies the previous afternoon, and that the final transaction would be concluded in exactly 24 hours, making the transfer of all his business assets to the conspirators irreversible. Almost at the same time, Margaret's phone rang with a call from the hospital where she had been treated, and the cardiologist urgently informed her that the follow-up tests showed her heart was rapidly failing due to complications from the previous heart attack and the intense emotional stress she had suffered, and that she would need to undergo emergency heart surgery in the next few hours to have any chance of long-term survival. "Margaret, we have only 24 hours to save your son from financial ruin, and your life is at risk too," Lisa said desperately. "How are we going to expose this entire criminal scheme and still take care of your health at the same time? Time is running out quickly." Margaret looked directly into Lisa's eyes with a determination that surprised them both, and with a firm voice despite her physical weakness, declared that she would postpone the urgent heart surgery to save Alexander from the financial and emotional ruin that Victoria had so cruelly orchestrated. Lisa tried to argue about the deadly risks of this decision, explaining that each hour lost drastically reduced Margaret's chances of survival, but the courageous mother remained inflexible in her maternal determination that overcame any instinct for self-preservation. She knew that this could be her last opportunity to protect her son from complete destruction, and she was willing to risk her own life to ensure that the truth was revealed before it was too late. Margaret called the hospital and informed them that she would postpone the procedure for 24 hours, completely ignoring the urgent protests of the cardiologist, who warned her about the potentially fatal consequences of this reckless but heroic decision. "Margaret, you could die if you don't have this surgery now. Your heart won't handle much more stress," Lisa begged, holding her friend's trembling hands. "It doesn't matter, Lisa. I would rather die trying to save my son than live knowing I could have prevented his destruction." Working feverishly throughout the night, Margaret and Lisa devised a bold plan to infiltrate the gala event that Alexander was organizing that same evening to celebrate what he thought was a prosperous expansion of his business, but which would actually be the final signature of his financial ruin. Lisa obtained uniforms from a catering company through a friend who worked in the events sector, and prepared Margaret with subtle makeup and a wig that would make her unrecognizable to guests who might remember her from the public humiliation she had suffered months earlier. They also carefully prepared a devastating audiovisual presentation, using all the documents, photographs, and evidence they had collected, chronologically organizing the story of Margaret's sacrifices and Victoria's systematic betrayal in a format that would be impossible to ignore or refute. Margaret, despite the constant pain in her chest and growing weakness, remained focused on the mission to save Alexander, fueled by maternal adrenaline and the determination to deliver justice before her heart finally gave out. "Are you sure you can do this? The physical effort might be too much for your heart," Lisa asked worriedly, adjusting Margaret's uniform. "I endured decades of hard work with a sick heart, Lisa. I can endure one more night to save my son." The gala event was taking place in the main hall of Alexander's company headquarters, a luxurious environment decorated with expensive flowers, sparkling crystals, and elegant tables, where the most influential investors in the city gathered to celebrate what they thought was a brilliant business deal. Margaret and Lisa entered discreetly through the service entrance, blending in with the other catering staff, circulating and serving sophisticated drinks and refined canapés to the elegantly dressed guests. Margaret observed her son from a distance, dressed in an impeccable tuxedo, animatedly conversing with the same investors who had witnessed her public humiliation months before, and felt her heart dangerously accelerate upon realizing how Alexander seemed genuinely happy and confident, completely oblivious to the betrayal that was about to be consummated. Victoria looked stunning in a golden gown, her jewelry gleaming under the hall lights, playing the role of the dedicated and proud wife while secretly preparing to execute the final blow that would destroy everything Alexander had built. "Look at how she's playing the role of the perfect wife, knowing that in a few hours she will have stolen everything from him," Margaret murmured to Lisa, discreetly serving drinks. "This will be the last time she manages to deceive my son. The truth always comes to light, no matter how long it takes." First tonight, when the moment arrived for Alexander's speech, officially announcing the business expansion that actually represented his ruin, Margaret discreetly signaled to Lisa, who had strategically positioned herself near the hall's audiovisual system. Alexander was on stage, microphone in hand, thanking the investors and his wife for their unconditional support, when suddenly all the lights went out, creating a moment of confusion and murmurs among the surprised guests. Then the main screen lit up, initially showing an old photograph of a young Margaret, working at one of her 3 jobs, with a simple but powerful caption, This is the story of a mother who sacrificed everything for the son she loved. The silence in the hall was absolute as the presentation continued, methodically showing each document, each photograph, each proof of the heroic sacrifices Margaret had made for decades, including medical reports proving she had worked for years with a failing heart, risking her life daily to pay for Alexander's education. What is happening? Who is doing this? Victoria nervously shouted, trying to locate those responsible for the unexpected presentation. Someone turn this off immediately. Don't allow them to continue this ridiculous performance. The presentation then dramatically changed tone, showing the irrefutable evidence of Victoria's betrayal. The emails exchanged with Charles, the illicit bank transfers, the audio recordings where she and her lover coldly discussed how they would destroy Alexander and flee with the stolen money. The guests were shocked to see the extent of the conspiracy, and many began filming with their cell phones, realizing they were witnessing a scandal that would be news in the country's major economic newspapers. Alexander was paralyzed on stage, the microphone falling from his trembling hands, as he watched his life being simultaneously destroyed and reconstructed on the giant screen before him. Victoria desperately tried to exit the hall, but the doors had already been discreetly blocked by security guards whom Lisa had previously alerted about the situation, and she found herself cornered in the center of the hall, exposed before hundreds of witnesses who now knew her true criminal nature. "This is a lie. Someone forged these documents to incriminate me," Victoria desperately shouted, trying to maintain the facade until the last moment. "Alexander, you're not going to believe these absurd accusations against your own wife, are you? They're trying to separate us." It was at this crucial moment that Margaret revealed herself, removing her wig and slowly walking through the hall toward the stage, each step costing her immense effort due to her deteriorating heart condition. The guests moved aside to clear a path, many recognizing her as the woman who had been falsely accused of theft months before, and whispers of surprise and admiration began to circulate among those present who finally understood the truth about that situation. Margaret climbed onto the stage with dignity, supporting herself on the railing to avoid collapsing, and looked Alexander directly in the eyes for the first time since the terrible night she had been expelled from the mansion. The emotion of the reunion, combined with the shock of the devastating revelations about his wife, was too much for Alexander to bear. He staggered backward, completely lost consciousness, and collapsed on the stage floor, fainting in front of hundreds of witnesses who were watching the most intense family drama of their lives. "My son, Alexander," Margaret cried, rushing to help him despite her own extreme physical weakness. "Someone call a doctor. Please let him be all right. I cannot lose him now that he can finally know the truth." When Alexander finally regained consciousness a few minutes later, with Margaret holding his head in her lap as she used to do when he was a child, the first thing he saw were the loving and concerned eyes of the mother he had cruelly abandoned. Tears began to stream down his face as he slowly processed everything he had discovered. His mother's unimaginable sacrifices, his wife's calculated betrayal, and his own blindness that had almost cost everything that really mattered in his life. He tried to speak, to ask for forgiveness, to explain himself, but Margaret gently placed her finger on his lips and smiled with the same maternal tenderness she had always shown, even in the most difficult moments. In this moment of intense emotional reconciliation, Margaret's already fragile heart finally gave way under the weight of emotions and physical exertion, and she collapsed in her son's arms, suffering another heart attack even more severe than the previous one, while Alexander desperately screamed for medical help. "Mother, forgive me for everything I did to you. I should never have doubted the woman who gave me life," Alexander cried, holding Margaret. "Don't leave me now that I finally understand how much you love me. I need you with me to rebuild our family." There in the ambulance, rushing frantically toward the hospital, Margaret, even connected to emergency equipment and struggling to breathe, managed to hold Alexander's hand and smile weakly at the son she had recovered. With an almost inaudible voice but full of unconditional love, she uttered the words that summarized a lifetime of maternal sacrifices. "I would sell my inheritance 1,000 times for you, my son. Just don't sell yours for someone who doesn't deserve it." Alexander held his mother's hand firmly throughout the journey, promising that he would never again allow anyone to separate them, and vowing that he would do everything possible to make up for the years of pain and abandonment he had caused to the most important woman in his life. While Margaret was being quickly taken for emergency surgery, Victoria was being led handcuffed to the women's detention center, her perfect hair now disheveled, without makeup, wearing a prison uniform that contrasted drastically with the gala dresses she used to wear, while other inmates observed her with the contempt reserved for those who betray their own family. "Alexander, promise that you will forgive your old and stubborn mother. Promise that you will be happy, even if I can't stay here to see it," Margaret weakly murmured. "Don't talk like that, Mother. You're going to be fine, and we're going to recover all the lost time. I promise I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." 3 days after Margaret's successful surgery, Alexander visited Victoria in prison, carrying a folder with legal documents and an expression of cold determination that she had never seen before. Victoria, who had completely lost the artificial beauty she had always used as a weapon of manipulation, desperately begged for forgiveness, claiming she had been influenced by Charles and that she still genuinely loved Alexander. But Alexander, now fully aware of the depth of betrayal and manipulation he had suffered, simply placed the divorce papers on the visiting room table and coldly informed her that all the secret accounts she maintained had been discovered and confiscated by the authorities, and that Charles had fled the country without a trace, completely abandoning her. Victoria attempted one last emotional manipulation, feigning fragility and remorse, but Alexander remained unmoved by the performance, remembering all the times she had humiliated his mother in the same calculated and cruel manner. "Alexander, please, give me a second chance. I can change, I can be a better wife. Don't abandon me here," Victoria pathetically pleaded. "You stole the only treasure I had, my mother. Now discover what it's like to lose everything of real value in life." 1 week later, Alexander visited Margaret in the hospital, bringing official documents showing that Victoria had been formally convicted of business fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy, and that he had managed to cancel all fraudulent sales of his companies, completely recovering his assets through an intense but victorious legal battle. Margaret, now recovered from surgery and with her heart functioning properly for the first time in decades, thanks to appropriate medical care, cried with joy upon learning that her son was safe and that her struggle had not been in vain. Alexander then revealed the most important project of his life. He had created a foundation dedicated to helping single mothers facing difficulties similar to those Margaret had faced, offering education, medical care, and financial support so they could care for their children without sacrificing their own health and dignity. The foundation would be chaired by Margaret, who would finally have the opportunity to transform her own suffering into hope and support for other courageous women. "Mother, I want you to chair this foundation and help other mothers who are going through what you went through," Alexander said, showing her the documents. "I want your example of love and sacrifice to inspire other families to value what truly matters in life." 6 months later, Margaret was sitting in the renovated mansion garden, patiently guiding the staff on planting fruit trees that would provide shade and food for generations to come, while Alexander worked smiling on the porch, managing his businesses with a completely new perspective on what constituted true success in life. The golden plaque at the entrance of the foundation shone under the morning sun, proudly displaying the name chosen by both, Mother's Heart Foundation, because the true family treasure is not kept in vaults. Margaret had found not only justice and reconciliation with her son, but also a new purpose that gave meaning to all the years of struggle and sacrifice she had faced. Meanwhile, in a distant, cold cell at the women's detention center, Victoria observed through the small barred window a world to which she no longer belonged, holding a small, worn newspaper clipping showing Alexander and Margaret at the triumphant inauguration of the foundation, her tears of late repentance falling on the prisoner's clothes that now constituted her entire wardrobe. "Look, Alexander, the first families are already benefiting from the foundation. Your mother would be proud of the man you've become," Margaret said, watching children playing in the garden. "Mother, everything good I am I learned from you. Now it's our turn to give back to the world all the kindness we've received from life." Did you enjoy Margaret and Alexander's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there, and I'll be waiting for you.